Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is one of the best games I've ever had the pleasure of playing. The combat system is incredibly engaging and satisfying. I was hooked right from the beginning, and learning the intricacies of Sekiro's combat was fucking amazing. Because once you get good, you start feeling like a god looking down on the peasants as you revel in 7th heaven. Even the sound effect for the parry is just chef's kiss. It's like an orgasm for the soul, especially if you perfect parry a flurry of attacks. Also, the sheer amount of combat options at your feet is astounding, even though I'm a basic bitch when it comes to stuff like this. I just find whatever works best for me in the beginning hours and then I run with that style through the rest of the journey unless something particularly exquisite comes my way. But with all the Sekiro combat choreographers and channels like Ongoball, I hope I'm saying that right, they show the potential of what you can do with the combat system. No wonder people call this game a playable anime. I was already having a blast with this game, but I think it wasn't until Genichiro that I fell in love with the game. So before I proceed any further, spoiler warning for everything in the game, and also a warning, I'm gonna be all over the place through this video, so I'm sorry about that. So anyway. Reaching the top of Ashina Castle and facing the adversary who took your charge. The words of the Iron Code pulsing in your mind. We give it our all to bring our master back through any means necessary. This fight has everything. The emotional backing, the beautiful arena, and an amazing boss who keeps you on your toes. And the cherry on top being the third phase, which is just pure spectacle. The lightning reversal is one of the coolest things I've had the pleasure of experiencing in a game. And this is essentially just the first quarter of the game depending on which ending you're going for. Genichiro is also a fantastic character on his own. Being adopted by Isshin after being orphaned in the war, it was only natural that Geni would hold such a fondness for both the land and the family of Ashin. He was saved from a life of obscurity and suffering and given a life of distinction where he had the opportunity to live lavishly and also to train under Isshin and the legendary Tomoe. But despite all of his efforts, even going so far as to lose his humanity in order to protect Ashina, in the end he wasn't strong enough to save it. And he had to resort to resurrecting the legend that forged Ashina from nothing. The Sword Saint Isshin. A bit of a side note, I was cutting through my footage of the game because I had like 30 megabytes of space left on my laptop, but what I found was horrific. I have died more than 30 times to that damn paltry pagoda lone shadow, and although I don't have the footage, but I remember that I didn't even manage to kill him. He just fell off the cliff along with me or something like that, I think. Mind you, I first tried Gyobu and killed Genichiro in 7 tries, killed the Sword Saint in 13 tries, but the goddamn Lone Shadow gave me nightmares. And he wasn't even a boss! The only consolation to that situation is that later in the game I slaughtered his skin by the thousands, so I left with my dignity intact at the very least. It was painful seeing myself wildly running around and not deflecting in the early game, because I think I did the entire flashback section first. It took me a while to get used to Mikiri because I lost my mind trying to kill the Shinobi Hunter. I only managed it because I actually started using Mikiri. So going from that to no hitting the inner bosses and the gauntlets was a top tier experience. End of side note, and back to the good stuff. After facing the horrors of Mibu village and the creatures of the Sunken Valley, we come face to face with a figure that strikes a far bigger shadow than his frame should allow. A father. The owl stands between us and Kuro. In the face of our Alpha and Omega, we choose to break free of the restraints drilled into us for the sake of the bond between a shinobi and his master, and for freeing a child from the unfair burdens of humanity's greed. This fight is fucking awesome. Probably my favorite in the base game. The owl fights you with such personality. He embodies being a shinobi, strength, deception, and finesse. The owl has it all in spades. This fight is designed in a way that it feels personal, even in the combat, because the owl uses every trick in the shinobi book and he uses the abilities from the shinobi text and the shinobi tools, scolds the wolf for being a lousy shinobi if we fall to him. This awesomeness gets elevated in both the newer iterations of the owl. Both the father and the inner variant improve upon the formula, and that is why Inner Father is my favorite boss from the entire game. I was stupefied when I learned that Sekiro takes place through just one day because it makes no damn sense. Wolf being able to travel throughout the country and also the bonds we build with NPCs like the Sculptor and Emma has to at the very least happen in the span of days, right? But regardless, I would now like to talk about one of my favorite NPCs from all Souls games that I've played. The one who goes by many names. Names like the Sekiro, orangutan, or more commonly, the sculptor. He saves us from quite possibly a lowest moment as a shinobi, disgraced by being beaten in single combat and having our master being taken away. He nurses us back to health and even gives us the shinobi prosthetic. He continues to aid us through our journey and we slowly see him turn friendly and warm towards us. Especially when after a certain point in the story, every time we end dialogue with him, he essentially just says we are welcome anytime and that we are basically family. Okay, that family thing might be a bit hyperbolic on my part, but it has been some time since I completed the game and there were a fuck ton of exams in between. Nevertheless, the sculptor was an amazing, warm, and friendly presence that continued to aid us even in our most grave hurdles. And to see him regain his hope in people and in life, even if it was transient, and even though he himself knew that it was transient, still felt heartwarming and compelling. Later in the game, he makes a request of us. He asks us to kill him should the demon ever re-emerge, and to not let Emma do it. He feels that it will heavily affect Emma despite the fact that she has steeled herself to that eventuality. Yet, it is one thing to prepare and something else entirely to do. It broke my heart to see him transform into the demon. Despite his bloody past, his anger, his hatred, and most of all, his loneliness. He was trying his best to do better, to never spill blood and to never harm anyone again. Yet the chaos and the bloodlust of war reached the slumbering orangutan with him, one that was on the cusp of being possessed by Shura. But now that he was unchecked, there was no one to stop the disfigurement of the poor sculptor's soul. He transformed, twisted beyond recognition, a herald of war and devastation, a demon of hatred. This boss fight was absolutely fantastic, and that is despite of all the deaths I experienced here because I got too impatient to strategically think and learn. The demon is horrific yet majestic at the same time. You can't help but stare at it while constantly getting the urge to avert your eyes because you see the pain and the anguish your friend must be going through, and that he was transformed into the manifestation of the very thing that he was trying to avoid. And as the fight draws closer to its conclusion, the sculptor takes hold of his humanity one last time as you deliver the final blow, and he thanks you for releasing him from his hell. I acknowledge that he was someone that once killed for the sake of killing. The rage that set into him after Kingfisher's death was what led to that outcome, and he was absolutely wrong to go about numbing himself to his pain. Maybe he had no idea how to confront that pain. I know that's no excuse for mindless slaughter, but I experienced him through the eyes of the wolf. And to me, even after learning the orangutan's backstory, I could not bring myself to hate him. For it's hard to hate a man who is genuinely trying. Emma is another one of my favorite NPCs, from all Souls game to be honest. She is just so goddamn cool. Not only is she an innovative and amazing doctor, she is also a samurai trained by Isshin Ashina himself. And on top of all of that badass shit, she is also so kind and sweet, and her genuine care for the sculptor, Isshin, Kuro, and even the wolf is heartwarming. I did the Shura ending on my second playthrough because I wanted to 100% Sekiro, and my god, having to plunge that damn sword into poor Emma's neck every time I died to Isshin Ashina was honestly much harder than losing my mind on Isshin Ashina. Isshin was not really that big of a problem, but having to wipe my eyes every time I entered that battle was just ugh. I really liked the lore in this game. I think the Mortal Blade is honestly one of the coolest things I've ever seen. The lore behind the Mibu village and the Fountainhead Palace and the twisted interpretation of immortality with the bugs were all amazing. Another thing I'd like to mention is that Killers from the North Side mix of the Sword Saint battle from Rotomatic was so goddamn cinematic and goosebumps inducing. I keep going back to it just to witness the sheer awesomeness once more. If you have not, I'll link that video in the description. Now I'd like to talk about the ending. I had everything prepped for the return ending because I'd heard how that's the true ending, as it takes the most amount of work to achieve, but I decided against going for it in the end because it just didn't sit right with me that this poor child who has been a pawn on the battlefield of greedy warlords who lust for immortality, this child that has never had the privilege of actually being one, he had to be protected and sequestered. The wolf fought so long and hard to protect Kuro, and What is Kuro's salvation? He is now in the cradle that is in the divine child and now traveling to the west to return the dragon to its rightful place, to maybe end the curse of the dragon heritage forever, and maybe he gets to live properly after that. For me, this ending has way too many variables. Kuro deserves to finally be able to live a normal life. So I decided to go for the aromatic branch ending, which to me seems like a much better end. It hit me incredibly hard emotionally, and it just seems to be such a fitting end. It's not just a shinobi fulfilling his mission and protecting his master, but it's a story of a person who learned to go against everything that made him who he is, everything that he had known, for the sake of humanity and a poor child who had been treated as a tool for far too long. Then on my New Game Plus run, I did the Shura ending. Overall, it's pretty good, especially the epilogue narration of how the wolf has become a legend, a demon in red who irrigated the lands of Ashina in blood. So, to the conclusion, I've sung my praises of this game and how it's in the higher echelon of games that I've had the privilege of experiencing. This game is a solid 9 out of 10 for me, and I'm incredibly excited to play the rest of the Souls games. Until then, I hope you guys have a nice day. See ya!